Yeah, maybe Dia, do you want to start us off?
Absolutely. I'm Dia Abdo. I'm a Guilford professor in the English department and the director of Every Campus a Refuge. And I'm the director of the Center for North Carolinians at UNCG. And I love everybody on this call. And Riri is like family. So good to see your face, Riri.
Kian, you want to go next?
Hi, my name is Keon. I am a junior. I major in forensic biology. I'm from Greensboro, North Carolina.
Allison?
Hey everyone, my name is Allison. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a fourth year student, community and justice studies major, Quaker studies minor, and I'm from like the Triangle area.
And then Jahang.
Hey, I'm Zhihong Chen. I'm teaching in the history department, and I use she, her, hers. And I apologize for eating. I've been very hungry, so.
Totally fine.
No apologies necessary.
I'm Sonalini. I am teaching this one class at Guilford on forced migration and resettlement, but I work at UNCG now in their Institute of Community and Economic Engagement. And I am so glad that Riri was able to join us. Riri and I had the pleasure of traveling with Riri about 2 years ago now to a UN conference on refugeeism, which Dia was also at, and I got a chance to get to know her better there. And I was really interested in having kind of a student panel, and so. Riri will join us today, and she might also join us next Tuesday, where we'll have another group of students who are working with their a group of PPS scholars that are working on mental health in the Triad area, and so they're going to talk to us about some of the research that they're doing, and they're collaborating with ECAR on that research. Riri was born a refugee and she was in Thailand and came to the U.S. as a child when she was 8 years old. She is a community and justice studies major and also a minor in forced migration and resettlement. She is also working part time at a nonprofit in Chapel Hill called Transplanting Traditions, which she's going to talk a little bit more about in her presentation. And sloth is her favorite spirit animal. I thought that was really funny, so I'm going to share that all with you. So I'm gonna have Riri speak for about 20 to 25 minutes, and then there'll be some time for question and discussion. So yeah, Riri, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Sonali. So yes, my name is Riri. I go by Riri, but my given name is Chariri. In my culture, and in like where I came from, a lot of the Karen people are named has meanings. So Riri doesn't have any meaning, but Chariri has a meaning. Cha means star, and Riri means like the star is circling around. So I actually growing up all the way until I left the camp in Thailand, I go by my given name at birth, Chairiri. Until I came to the United States, the first sound of my name is Cha, and that's like my first name, and Riri becomes my middle name. And all of a sudden, I have Wei. I don't know how we got the last name Wei, so it's a yeah. So just a little story background on my name. But yes, our name does have meaning. So like in our culture, we just don't get named randomly. Um, So I was born in the refugee camp in 1998, just a year shortly after Tam Hin Refugee Camp was founded on the border of Thailand and Burma. There are other more established, already established refugee camps up on the northern side of Thailand, up closer to Burma. Tam Hin Refugee at that time was still fairly new, and yeah, I was born there and I grew up there until I was 8.5 years old. My family, my mom originally, she started the refugee resettlement process actually a little bit back, and we were actually assigned to go to Australia. But then something had happened and I didn't understand what happened. I was young. But then my dad at the same time, he didn't want to come to the United States. He has so much like, ties to the land and like, from the bottom of his heart. So having to relocate to a new country didn't make sense to him. But my mom in the end convinced him. Some at the end though, I think she gave him an ultimatum. You either go with us to Thailand or you stay here without your children. I'm leaving without you. And the kids. So yeah, with it, we resettled to the United States in 2006, I think around September. Yeah. Um, we did have a little bit of school back then. Like our education system wasn't that great, but honestly, I think our math subject was better than the United States. Um, I learned how to do my timetables and other division, whatever, and learn how to read the clock and everything. Just 2 months after I started second grade in Thailand, and when I came here, I was in second grade. I was like, "What? These kids don't know their clock? They don't know how to read this?" I was like, "Oh no!" So during math class, I get really bored, but then English wise, it's another story. Um, Life in the camp wasn't that easy. Everything from our clothing to our food, um, to the structure, like materials for our house, were all donations from NGOs. And for us to be able to like, get like luxury items, but they're still part of our needs, are like that's like, if we want to buy like a brand new jean, those are like luxuries item that my parents would work for. Growing up, my dad, I remember he was also barely around, only because in the camp, when you try to go look for a job, there's no job in the camp at all. And if you try to leave the camp, you have to sneak out before sunrise. And if you try to come back after work, you have to come after sunset. Yeah. Um, So sometime like my dad would be done for work, but then he'll wait until the sun goes down so that like when they come back, they wouldn't get caught by like, Thai guards. And if you do get caught, you will be taken to jail immediately, and you will not be bailed, and you can't leave until you have the money right away to bail out, to get bailed out. So and I never really understand why I was in a refugee camp, or like why our house was this and this and that, why we have a tarp instead of like a nice roof, as our roof, why our house is made out of bamboo, um until my aunts and uncle, they came from Burma as well, and they didn't get the refugee status. Thailand has paused that, I think, in the early 2000, and they came like just a year or two after. So my rest of my other family members are undocumented in Thailand, and they work on the DL. That's when, like, they were older, so they could find a job here and there, and they'll be eating these good food, or like, we think it's good food, but here in the US, I'm like, oh, those are like now snacks. Um, and I always wonder, why does he get to eat or she gets to eat this, but I can't? And then that's when I started realizing that, like, am I poor or that kind of thing? Yeah. So it was like actually a little early on, like 7 years old, when I started questioning what was happening around me. But then at the same time, when I heard we were going to the America, we're like, ooh, we're going to America. Until we came to the United, yeah, I was so excited. I was ready to leave. We were the first group to be resettled from Thailand, especially folks from Burma around the early 2000. No, 2006, 2007. There's a huge group of like refugees that from Thailand, especially the Korean population, that the United States resettled to the US. Um, So then when we resettle, it was a long process. We actually started since I was in first grade, and we didn't so it was like a year later then we were able to leave. But then now the resettlement process got so much faster. People they vetted folks so fast, and we're like, wow, we could have left Thailand in 2005, but yeah. It was a long wait. not knowing, my parents, especially my parents, not knowing when this is gonna be, and we just kept waiting. And my dad constantly like going about, oh, is he ever gonna see his parents again? Same thing with my mom. Um, when we were settled, we went through a lot of stuff. For the first time in my life, my mom just kept records of our birthday and stuff. I didn't know my birthday date, the date, like it was March 13th, 1998, when we had to go through like an interview. An 8-year-old who was never like told this is your birthday, and they asked you, what's your name? I froze. Or like, when's your birthday? I froze. I'm like, I don't know. Never have I ever interacted with another person who is Korean in my life. So seeing like these people, I'm like, I don't want to talk to you, or I don't know my birthday at all. I don't know how to respond to you. So that was weird to me to be able to learn that that's my birthday. When we resettled, we went through like, because we were in the camp, we had to take a bus to get to Bangkok, and then from Bangkok we stayed at a hotel overnight. They provided us food, but we were just so exhausted. And then right before we left, we hop onto the airport, or like on our way to get to the airport from that hotel to the airport, we received a letter says, "Oh, you're no longer going to Chapel Hill, North Carolina. You have been assigned to go to South Carolina." And we're like, "Oh, okay, we don't know anyone in South Carolina, but I guess we're going." So then we took the plane, and then we got to, I think we stopped at Japan or China, and then we got to Chicago. And that's when the last time we ever saw all the group of like other Korean families. We separated, we all went our own flight to get to our designated states. And that's when, I don't know, something at that moment it clicks. I'm like, this is it. We won't be able to see you, and we won't be able to see other Korean people again. How are we ever going to communicate and reconnect again? um we're gonna be alone, as a family in a state where we don't know anybody. Like, I'm gonna have to meet strangers. Yeah. So we hop onto the next plane to get to South Carolina, and then we started school there. My parents, like, I was a child, I didn't know what was going on. So my parents, honestly, they didn't like it because the interpreter for the Refugee Resettlement Organization really used my family. They would ask my mom to take care of their son for free, or like say, oh, I'll give you this amount of money for the whole month. And I think that's like, it was under $100 for the whole entire month. And my mom has to feed, put this kid to sleep, wipe the diaper, and all of that. And I'm like, oh yeah, you can do that. And like my mom says, you know what, just don't give me money, just drop off your children. And then when our resettlement agency would give us toys, the interpreter will take the brand new toys and then give us the one that are already opened or used toys. And they'll also try to use our food stamp as well and other things. And they would talk bad about my mom in Burmese. But the thing is that my mom, she at that time, she knows 3 languages. She know Burmese, Korean, and there's this other indigenous language. I don't know. She doesn't remember that language anymore. Yeah. She was like talking, that interpreter talked bad about my mom in the refugee, like with other like Burmese folks, or like saying bad stuff in Burmese. And my mom stood up and cried, and we're like, and she spoke to that interpreter in Burmese. And that interpreter was shocked. But yeah, and we didn't like it there. My parents didn't like it there either, because my dad was working at Chick-fil-A and he was getting paid really low, and he didn't have transportation. At the same time, we didn't make enough money to pay for our mortgage or like our rent, or yeah, any other thing. So glad though it was a church that sponsored my family, that they pick up all the other bills that we couldn't pick up. And then shortly after, we lived there for like 6 months. In March of 2007, we moved to North Carolina, and that's when both of my parents got a permanent job at UNC Chapel Hill as housekeepers, and then I would be attending school there, in Chapel Hill district. Growing up as like a kid, I haven't got a chance to learn my own language, and now having to transition to learning a new language, because like I was a child, I was 8 years old. I picked up English quickly. They pulled me out of the ESL program after a year I was there, and I thought that wasn't enough time, but only because I could speak it. But I don't understand anything other than English than speaking it. Um, but then yeah, they pulled me out, and like I was fine with it. So then I was treated like the rest of the other students because I could speak the language. Um, my parents and other Korean people. Then when we moved to a population where there was Korean people. That's how we end up in Chapel Hill. Um, I would be asked to go interpret to insurance company to read these documents, to translate these documents for them, to go with my mom in the middle of the night to help her interpret for a job interview. I was doing that at like 10 or 11 years old, and I'll be interpreting at so many places. And I guess that's where like I also like picked up English more and understand some of the system, like having to take when my little sister was born, she was yellow. I don't know what the word for it. I call it yellow mellow. And I had to go to the ER with my mom to interpret for my mom because sometimes like the telephonic system, when they say, oh, you're from Burma, they assume that you can speak Burmese, but no. But then at the same time, okay, they'll find you a Korean person, they think it's Korean. We're not Korean, we're Karen. That's why like my mom always take me places. Me, I don't understand none of these English word. I go and use my body gesture words and language, like body language and all of that to make meanings out of it. Yeah, I was at the ER when I was 12 years old with my mom because my little sister, she was turning yellow, and somehow we were able to make it through. Another story is that like my mom, she had a really bad illness. I think it was UTI. And I didn't know what UTI was. And like the word in Korean is chiti, and that literally means dead pea. But like I didn't know like the terminology for it, and it was really hard. My mom was in pain, and it was really hard back then for them to find interpreters, or to even request interpreters. Now the UNC system has gotten better with getting interpreters. So that was most of like my childhood in terms of like being the family interpreters and everything else. Um, so then at the same time, school was really challenging. I was more of like I was kind of like the role model at the same time. A lot of things were projected on me, like, oh, I'm supposed to go to college. So like I took a lot of honors and like AP courses, which in the end, not because my parents pressured me, but at the same time, the school and the education system in general pressured you like, oh, if you take this, it'll look good on this. So and I never really mentally took into effect of like how damaging that could affect me. So then I went to college, and a lot of time everything that I've been through, I never really like took notice or was taught to look after my mental well-being, and that's something I'll talk about it shortly. I got into like an episode of like depression throughout my life that I didn't know, to the point where like sometimes like these were effects that like I didn't know was happening to me at the same time while I was doing other things, where now I'm just trying to really prioritize my mental health, and especially like came to the United States as a refugee kid. Trauma happens, and then later in life memories or events comes up unexpectedly at the time when I don't want those to come up. So I have to learn that as part of like as a childhood refugee, that these stuff is going to happen, to learn more about that. So surely about a little bit about my advocacy work. I was an intern for eCar for a little bit, and I volunteered for eCar, and I volunteered at Glen Haven. My really special site. Can we for one moment, please? Okay, so just the whole resettlement process, it can be like very painful, um and understanding what refugee family needs versus like what we think they need, and Bonner in some way really helped me to dive in a little more into that, and eCar gives me another, like, the idea of like radical hospitality. Even though I came through it, like I thought I know what it is, but like my family were so blessed to have that church taking care of us that we didn't have to worry about other people. They weren't as, I don't want to say unfortunate, but like having that like 100% full support system, um it was very hard. And to this day, like, and then each year what I went through after resetting to this country is totally different from what folks are now experiencing. So that's something, it's always changing, and I wish I had something to say, oh, this is the manual for now or what we can do. Another thing is that, like, for me, while like doing that kind of work also led me to like my special, that thing that holds in my heart is cultural food. I love to eat food. I didn't know the significance of it, and I still don't like to cook my own food because I don't know how to cook and I don't want to learn. Is the fact that is the importance of cultural significant food and why food justice in general is important. Having access to food is great. Okay, there's vegetables, there's cucumbers, there's this and that, but it doesn't make meanings to our soul and like our comfort, and to be able to resettle and feel like you can be at home. It feels like you have to assimilate to the American culture. You have to eat salad. You have to eat this or that. I didn't make sense of it until I started working with Transplanting Tradition Community Farm. I joined as as a part of their youth program. I entered for them and I become a consultant, and now I'm working with them. And the more I dive into it, like having access to cultural food in some way connect us to our root, and that is so important in terms of like how we're able to continue on the stories of what we went through. Like food carry on with us no matter where we go. um yeah, so that's my job with at TTCF right now, is like finding ways to now come up with like ideas to sell Asian vegetables to other Asian community, to refugee communities, and figure out like now, like instead of having CSA for the American vegetable, let's have like CSA for Asian vegetables, those kind of avenues. But our priority is try to get the Asian vegetables to the refugee Asian community, or like Asian vegetable in general. Yeah. So that like we think about access, affordability, and well-being. So I throw in a lot. Any question?
And Riri, before we do Q&A, maybe I know Catherine and Clara came a little bit late. Catherine and Clara, would you just like to just introduce yourselves, maybe your names, your majors, and generally what you're up to? Catherine, do you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. My name is Catherine. I am a public health graduate of Guilford. I know Riri from being on student government, so I know Riri, and I'm just taking the class to enjoy it and really get some better knowledge of what this is about, of course. So, yeah.
Thanks, Catherine. And Clara, I know you had your PSAT ran over a little bit, so but welcome. I'm glad you were able to join us. Clara.
Hi, I'm Clara. I'm at the early college. I don't really have a major or anything, but I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, Clara. Yeah, so we have about Riri with us for another 20-25 minutes, and I'm hoping that she'll also show us her cute kitten at some point, if she feels comfortable coming out of the crate. But yeah, questions, comments, feedback to Riri.
I just want to say like thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate you coming to the class today. And then I had like a clarifying question about the nonprofit that you're working with right now. I didn't catch the name, but I wanted to write it down for my notes.
called Transplanting Tradition Community Farms, and I'll put the website on there as well.
Thank you.
Hmm.
I guess I'll follow up to Allison's question about the work that you're doing on food justice and refugee communities, and there's one of the interesting things that I find about your work is that in the US there's this big kind of local food movement, and it sounds like in some of your work you're kind of um, maybe subverting or challenging like what counts as local food, right? And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how that work that you're doing with transplanting traditions has been received in the community as furthering like food justice initiatives, particularly around local food, or if you see these things as kind of separate. We might have lost Riri. Uh-oh. Oh, I think we lost her. Darn it. Dia, I might, while we're waiting for Riri to reconnect, I might ask you, I know you make all the students in ECAR do a project that is connected to refugee rights, refugee resettlement. Can you talk a little bit about the project, like the assignment guidelines and maybe the one that Riri did for your class?
Sure. I want to say that, Riri is incredible, and I really enjoy sort of listening to her story from her perspective. It's really powerful. And a lot of the things that Riri describes, especially, I don't know if you noticed, I find that piece especially powerful for children, for refugee children, is the inverted power dynamic that happens between parents and children because the children become interpreters for the parents. And so, the effects of that are really far reaching. So not only does the child sadly get taken out of school, that's happened to a lot of the refugee kids that we've hosted through ECAR. They, on a day when the mom or the dad has to go see a doctor and there's no interpreter, the kid has to be taken out of school to do the interpreting. And so the kid, the child, sometimes falls behind. Clearly that has not happened to Riri because she's a rock star, but it has happened to some of the children that we've hosted, or that, the families that we've gotten to know. I remember the first Syrian family that we hosted, they sent sort of an attendance report. And then so I talked to the mom about it, and she said, well, those are all the days that we had to go on like there was some appointment that Tamar had to go with them on. And so it was really eye-opening for us to see how integration for refugees and immigrants is so incredibly challenging and affects them for generations to come, because the children are helping the parents in that early stage. So sometimes they can fall behind, but also problematically for refugee and immigrant parents who come from cultures where usually the parent holds all the knowledge and makes all the decisions, inverting that dynamic of having the child interpret and be kind of the authority in the room. Like they're the one who has the information. They're the one who can deliver that information, is actually quite damaging to parent-child relationships and can be very painful, because the father or the mother is now experiencing themselves as, for the first time, not able to support their child, that their child, who might be 10 or 11, is supporting them. So it's culturally painful, and a sort of a cultural, I think, trauma. And I just wanted to point that out. So one of the things that we did for ECAR when students took the ECAR class was that they had to pick a project that did two things. It aligned with their passions, their interests, their skills, their discipline at Guilford College, but also it aligned with the stated needs of the community, right? So they had to do research on what the community actually needs rather than sort of reinventing, oh, I want to do X, Y, or Z because I think it's cool. Well, did you see that the community isn't actually already doing that? So, they had to do research to figure out what is it that the community actually needs, which means talking to the service providers, talking to the hosted families, and then creating a project that sort of fills that need, speaks to that need, and also aligns with their disciplinary interests. And so Riri's project was really interesting. It focused on childcare and supporting parents. Riri has an interest in education, obviously, and children and tutoring. And so she created like parents, children's night out so that parents would have time. And it was such a simple, basic, but needed activity, like having movie nights on campus with, activities and things like that for the kids where the parents had 3 or 4 hours off, was incredible. And so she did that, like several events geared towards sort of stimulating the children, but also giving parents some much needed respite.
Yeah, did she ever show Chicken Little or Little Chicken?
Did Kavya come to that?
I think she
We invited all the brown kids.
Yeah. No, I appreciated that it was
Yeah.
open to Guilford families too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, that's great. Yeah, I just texted Riri. I think she's still having some trouble connecting, but hopefully she'll be able to join in a minute. Yeah, anything else from Riri's presentation that you just kind of want to reflect on as a group?
Can I say something? When the Dia was just talking about how, and I know coming from New York City, we see a lot of times when we go to the hospitals, emergency rooms, we see children interpreting for their parents, and I never realized how much the dynamics have changed in different cultures where mom and dad is the ultimate, and the children are kind of children, and so then you realize even in the interpretation, especially if it's something a complicated medical issue, even then the children have trouble. And so you there's a missed opportunity because the parents can't understand what's being told them because the children don't have enough skill, upper skills to interpret what's really going on medically. So there's an option. There's some situations there that's very important to understand, that we don't even realize it just as being able to speak English. We don't even pay any attention until you see that and you're like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, that's a serious problem there. Um, and you want to reach out and help, and it's like, well, you can't because you can't communicate with them. And you see the frustration in the parents as well as the doctors and the physicians, nurses. It's just a big, even when they get an interpreter, and like she said, there's so many different dialects to one language at times that that's not even helping either. So it's a word could mean something totally different between, my dad is from Liberia, from different tribes. The word could have a different, so it's very, very, very challenging.
And connected to that, I was in an IAC meeting, the International Advisory Council meeting in Greensboro, and one of the women who is working with that group, she mentioned that now the city has to provide translation. Like if they're doing an event and there's a request for translation, the city has to find money to pay a translator or transcribe the event in some way. Is is that true, Dia? Has that been your experience in
I don't know. I mean, there's Title VI, right? So you have to provide health and human services in accordance with Title VI, and in this case, it's language. Um, but I think some of the challenges that Riri spoke about sort of go beyond the availability of interpreters or even the funding, right? You have to be careful that you're asking for a Karen, not a Korean speaker. And that even though the person might be from Burma, they don't necessarily speak Burmese. And if they're Arabic, they don't speak, the Sudanese dialect, they might speak the Egyptian dialect. And, so there's all of that. There's the speed with which you can get interpreters. So sometimes it's not as quick as, oh, something's happening. So we had some communication with the Greensboro Police Department to talk about like 911 and things like that. It's not very easy to get someone on the phone in an emergency situation, right? Like someone's trying to communicate to you, like my child is suffocating or whatever. I need 911 can't easily say, hold on while I get language line. Tell me what language you speak. They can't speak English. Like, how do you get that? So yes, I mean, Greensboro is, as you all know, really diverse. We have over 150 languages spoken in Greensboro. We have at the CNNC an interpreter bank and another interpretation service called Language Resources, and there's language lines. So there are resources available, but sometimes organizing all of that can be challenging, and especially when it's needed sort of in the moment. And I have to run. I'm so sorry. It was so nice to see you all, and I will try and log in next week. But I forget what but I'm also on the calendar. And there's Riri. She's back. Okay. Bye.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Hi guys, so sorry, my internet dropped and
No worries.
I was trying to text Allison, but I was like, wait, I can't text you because my internet dropped, so it won't send the message. Oh,
No, no worries, no worries. We're glad to have you back on the call though. Yeah, we were just talking about the points that you were raising about interpreters and um, yeah, and how that Dia mentioned that kind of inverting the power relationship a little bit. Where it's the kids who are empowering the parents as opposed to vice versa. And and was there ever any like tensions that arose because of that changed power dynamic?
the tension I still experience is not because of my parents whatsoever. Is when these medical providers or like when I go and then do interpreting for my grandma, they're like, no, we have to have a certified person. Anyway, I am certified interpreter. I just don't go and tell them, oh, I'm certified. Here's my certification. But I'm also a family member. But the thing is that I remembered I was trying to fight with this nurse. Well, okay, I wasn't trying to fight, but really trying to like I didn't give feedback or anything. It was like I can interpret it for my grandma because I'm also like in some way the caretaker of my grandma. I drop off and pick up her medication. I take her to appointments and I follow up with all of her other medical. Like you're not the only person I have to follow up with for other her health care her health need. And that she didn't end up listening to me and we end up getting a telephone interpreter and that interpreter literally misinterpreted everything. And I was like, you know what, grandma, just listen and say yes, no. And then when we go back, I'll explain everything to you. My grandma, she was having some issue and the doctor said one thing, but the interpreter said it the opposite. And, I didn't want to stir up any more thing because sometimes like if I try to like be patient and like trying to get out of the office as soon as possible so then we can deal with it at home. Yeah, and they take the word of that interpreter through the phone more than me. I mean, I would understand sometimes family members we could like, said some stuff whatsoever, but like I know the rules of interpreting. I got certified. I took that course and I know. Um and yeah, sometimes like what is it called? Yeah, we can be biased and influencing our family member when we interpret for them, but not on my grandma's case. My grandma, yeah. Probably my siblings I would, but my parents and my grandma, I have to be very honest with them when I interpret and for their health case and stuff. Yeah, that's the issue I would come across with.
Any other questions or comments, clarifications?
I have a question, Riri. So you mentioned that in South Carolina, this kind of abusive interpreter. So is the interpreter the same person as a caseworker for your family's case? Because last week's reading, we read about a caseworker for each case. Is that the same person or different?
Different. The interpreter is just the interpreter, but she's Korean, but she likes to speak in Burmese. She really prides herself in like being a Burmese nationality. But yeah, we had our own caseworker, but she was just the interpreter. Yeah, but we were like because she immigrated here with a visa and everything, and we were technically their first Karen or like any refugee resettled from Burma in South Carolina. Yeah. So oh yeah, so then sorry, I forgot my point. So then the agency and the church would like filter like their message to that interpreter and the interpreter would share it with us. Yeah.
I actually have another question. Is that okay, Salanini?
Oh, of course, yeah. Go for it, John.
Yeah. Um, so speaking of the dynamic between you and parents, we were talking about the impact of the reversal of a kind of authority. So um, did you feel that your parents experienced that tension or pain, that they felt that they've lost some authority that they would have had in their home? I mean, back home, and they felt this maybe a degree of helplessness in terms of educating your children, and maybe disciplining children. Did you discern any tension in that regard?
Yes and no. For me, no. With my younger siblings, yes. Because they came here when they were so much younger, like 5 and 4s and 3s and 2s and 1s. Well, no, there was no 1 year. So they grew up here as Americans. So then there's an American kids here. For me, I'm kind of in the middle, and my younger siblings, of course, we had an understanding of like culture dynamic and discipline and how we were raised. So I feel like yeah, my parents do struggle. Like, and then we had and then my youngest sister, she's born here in the U.S. and like she's a completely American kid. So I think there's like 3 or 4 dynamic in the ways my parents would have to interact with all of us. So that's interesting. And in the ways that about dynamic, at the same time, I don't think my parents, sorry, one more I'm so sorry, guys. I'm really bad right now. I'm so sorry. My parents would they feel actually empowered when they could use their children to interpret for them. But then sometimes they also feel disempowered when they have to ask my younger siblings because they can't speak Korean that well. And then like it's kind of really hard to get anything done. And it's a really funny joke, but it's serious at the same time. Like sometimes when none of us are available, the one who could speak Korean better, my younger brother, he's the only boy in the house, and my dad asked him to go and interpret for this thing, and he never gone to a Korean school at all. He went to school all here all his life, and there's some word that he couldn't say. So sometimes when he interpreted, he'd be like, that kind of manipulate, blah blah. Like he's not making some of his word, and my dad would be so annoyed with that because like he understands my brother can't speak Korean, and he can't speak English. And then when my dad was like, okay, if I'm gonna ask you to help me take me to this place, don't say yeah like that. Yeah. At the same time, I think both of my parents, they also really feel disempowered because of what this culture or in this country present to us. They feel like we've lost some connection to our roots, um, in the way we're raised and all of that, and the way of life, the way of living. Um, yeah, and it's real, and like I told him to, even I, like, no matter how hard, how much I want to be able to, like, practice a lot of my cultural practice because I want to, it's still hard because it's not accessible. And like some of the practices and traditions, we can't carry on a lot of them here. So yeah.
I was just gonna say, I'm happy to be in this class because it's like kind of broadens my horizon about, you know, immigrants as well as refugees, because I wasn't really informed. Like I didn't really have an understanding of like what you guys go through. So it's like really eye-opening to hear like different perspectives, different stories. Because I'm really learning a lot. Like it's just, I take so much for granted. And it's like you really don't realize what people actually go through. Like I hear stories, like, but it's just like really real when you hear people actually go through things. So um definitely happy that you're here speaking, because definitely eye-opening for me.
Yeah, thank you.
I had like one last question if we have time.
Yeah.
I know that like the achievement gap in like Chapel Hill school system is like pretty intense. It's like one of the better funded and like in terms of resources school systems in North Carolina, but it does have like the highest achievement gap. So I was wondering if you could kind of speak a little bit more to how you experienced that, if it's relevant.
Can you repeat that again, Allison? My internet dropped again.
I was just wondering if you could talk about how like the achievement gap in the Chapel Hill like school systems like affected you, because I know that's like a big issue there.
Yes. It put me in the model minority cycle. That I didn't realize that it was a thing until Andrew Young taught me about this word. I'm like, I fall into that category. And at the same time, like constantly, I was pressured to be with the other East Asian and students who parents would pay for all their courses and preparatory courses and like willing to buy them anything and Saturday schools, all of that. And my parents, we don't have any of that. My weekends is spent seeing them at their job, like at the farm, cleaning the house, taking care of my siblings. Yeah, or going outside and play. But yeah, um, and at the same time, I was also pressured to do service work, which that one I, for the bottom of my heart, I still want to do, no matter how stressful I could be. Um, to be involved in courses, to be involved in extracurricular activities, and just so that I could get into the college that I want to. But at the same time, like I noticed it, like for me, I push myself because at the same time of the expectation to meet the achievement gap. And at the same time though, I noticed my friends who were really struggling. They weren't like, and like some people get it, like, when they advocate for themselves, it like it's hard for them to advocate for themselves, like to ask seek help. Like I always knew that I always got to advocate for myself from a really young age. But for them, like, but then it doesn't have to, like, they don't have to advocate for themselves, like these services aren't provided to them. At the same time, our school would do something really messed up sometime, where like even the district, where like if a if a white student wanted to take these courses and textbooks are available, or like there's spots available, they would automatically enroll these students. And but if a student of color whatsoever wanted to sign up for honors classes, AP courses, or needed something for these courses, the school's like, oh, we don't have money for that. And that's when I learned that my AVID teacher, she's like, if they can find money for these white people, they can find money for these students of color. So that's our district. They have all the resources funded for the white students, but barely for students of color, immigrant students, ESL students. Yeah.
Riri, continue on with Allison's question about the education theme. You mentioned that you were a Bonner Scholar, that you're a community and justice studies major. How do you think that Guilford does in terms of support for immigrant refugee communities? I know the Bonner Scholars Program is going to be phased out. Yeah, I wonder if you could share a little bit about how you think your experiences in school, or your experiences at Guilford differed from your experiences in school, or kind of mirrored some of those experiences.
Yeah, so Guilford as the institution is not doing enough to support local immigrant students. I see that still. Many students are walking past through, like they would either enroll in community colleges, when Guilford prides himself in community and service and blah 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 Quaker values. But why aren't you guys enrolling more local immigrant students and refugee students, so that like we can get these students where you guys prize yourself in with these values? But I do know I've never seen any program as successful as the Bonner Center before, and the Bonner Foundation in general. Like I didn't know I was gonna go to a 4-year institution without Bonner, and without the endless support of the CMJS department that my major is in. Um, just that so much of radical learning and radical caring for each other in this space is the reason why I stayed here in Guilford. I would already transferred out my sophomore year. And for so many times, I have thought about transferring out because Guilford isn't just doing enough to make me feel like I'm part of the community. But because of Bonner and CMJS and ECAR, I remained in Greensboro and also like Glen Haven as well. Um, yeah, I that's my opinion.
Thank you for sharing that. And I don't want to. I know we said from 1 to 2, and so I don't want to keep you and your sweet kitten beyond the time that we had talked about. But thank you so much, Riri. We really appreciated hearing your individual narrative and your story. It was very very powerful and compelling. And yeah, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. Um, yeah, will everyone join me in thanking Riri for her time?
Thank you, Riri.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you very
welcome.
much.
Yes, if you guys ever want to stay in
Thank you,
contact or
Riri.
to follow up, you can text me or email me. Actually, I'll give you guys my Guildford email. There's my phone number and my email. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Riri.
So Riri,
Yes.
I know you're closer to graduation. When is your graduation date? Are you
I,
graduating this spring or
I
later?
am. I am graduating this May. I mean, I would have graduated in December, but I'm still here. I don't know why, but I'm still here. Yeah, I'll be graduating this May.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks, Riri.
Okay. See y'all later. So
Yeah.
sorry about the internet drop and then back and
Thank
forth with
you.
the
No worries.
thing. Bye.
Thank you.
And we're almost at 2, so I thought maybe we could take like a 10-minute break and then come back for the second half of class after 10 minutes. I could stretch, use the bathroom. So I'll see you back here in 10 minutes.